I mean, if I could sum up all the advice I ever got from billionaires, it was basically, yeah, whatever most people tell you, do the opposite. That's the general advice I got from the richest people on earth.
Jeff, welcome to the show, man. I am so excited about this. You know, a lot of people nowadays, they're younger, and 2008 is kind of just this thing that their parents talked about, the Great Recession. They didn't really have an impact. It didn't change their life. It didn't impact their finances. They didn't lose their house. They just witnessed it from afar, maybe from their parents or their friends' parents. But you and I lived the real Great Recession. And I want to talk about, you were a former piano player, professional piano player, and you had an injury, a wrist injury, which probably made it hard to play piano, right?
Yeah, it was arthritis. So it was really frustrating because it would start to feel better. And the thing that I would want to do when it felt better would go make it worse, which was play piano. So it just eventually, and it's like a tease where like, oh, I'm getting better, I can do it again. And then eventually you just have to accept, okay, I need to take like 5 years off. And I'll never be the way I was. And that's where I'm at. I'll never be able to do it at that level again.
Oh my God, there's so many parallels just to that right there. I mean, like, I think of my snowboarding career when I had my injury, and like all you want is to come back, but you just start to realize quickly that you'll never make it back. Yeah. So you had this pivot, this transition you had to go through, but it didn't come easy. First, did you get evicted from an apartment?
Yeah, amongst several things that were going wrong at the time. So, I mean, it's a little backstory. Yeah, the whole time I was a pianist, I was always trying to start businesses. I was kind of like pianist by night. I was like a student in the morning, a piano teacher in the, no, sorry, I was a student in the morning, an aspiring entrepreneur in the first part of the afternoon, a piano teacher in the second part of the afternoon, and then a gigging piano player in the evenings. So that was like my daily circuit. And so those few hours in the afternoon, I was always trying to start this or that business. And the reason I got that bug is because as a piano player, I had actually, and it's funny, as a musician, all you have to do is like comb your hair, shave, get a suit that fits, be on time to gigs, and word gets out about you. Cause like, I mean, I love musicians. They're near and dear to my heart, but they're not all like super on the ball professionalism wise. So because I was a very professional, I started getting booked on all these gigs. Like I was playing private parties in the homes of billionaires when I was like 24 years old. So I played like Tillman Fertitta, the guy, he's got a TV show, $1 Billion Buyer. I would play piano at his house for like house parties and stuff.
Wow.
And this was, almost 20 years ago. So I caught the bug early of like, oh my gosh, all these legitimate like 100 millionaires and billionaires that are hiring me. Who are these guys? Where did they go to school? Right? What did they order for dinner? I want to be like them. Well, they were all entrepreneurs. They'd all started their own companies. So I'm like, oh man, they have what I have, which is time freedom, flexibility, and they get to kind of do stuff that they love. Although in hindsight, I didn't really have that much time freedom because I worked like 100 hours a week. But in my mind, I did because I was a musician, right? I was like outside the mainstream, but they also had a lot of money. So I'm like, oh, I want to be like them. So I should take whatever spare time I can find and starting businesses. And I failed at just like one after another. And that's a whole story. It was about a dozen failures all through my 20s, everything from originating home loans for Countrywide, which is ironic. I was part of the problem that led to the Great Recession. But I was a party promoter. I would organize raves. I tried flipping houses on credit cards. I joined an MLM. You name it, I did it. Right. And anyways, it came to a head in my late 20s. Like you say, I ended up not only evicted from my apartment, but I had taken on small business administration loans. So SBA backed, federally guaranteed bank loans for starting small businesses. And I had tried to open 2 franchise restaurants. And this was so indicative of the times. 2006, I was a 27-year-old piano player. I'd never made more than $40,000 in a year. I'd never had a successful business. I had a string of unsuccessful businesses, and the bank was still willing to loan me basically $400,000 to open these 2 restaurants that like I was the last guy on earth they should have been betting on to open these businesses. And then they did it right in the mouth of the Great Recession, and the world fell apart. My businesses went upside down. So now I'm on the hook for between federally insured bank loans, which essentially means I owe the US Treasury, plus defaulting on leases, plus back taxes, unemployment taxes, blah, blah, blah. It was $495,000 is what I owed to various parties that were either governmental entities or real estate investment trusts with very good lawyers. So in either case, I was like, these were battles I was not equipped to fight. And I basically just went into hiding. I got evicted from my apartment. My wife, she tried to separate from me, but then she also took pity on me because I got evicted. So she's like, well, let me talk to my parents and maybe you can come live at their house. So I'm living at my wife's parents' house out of pity while she's also separated from me. So we're like living in different rooms. And I mean, so I just lock myself in my room. I never want to come out of the room. And I go on the internet and I'm like, okay, I got to figure out how to pay off $500,000 in debt just so I can move out and start a new life. And I don't know where you want to go with the story, but that's what brings you to that moment. Yeah.
There's so many places, but I mean, it's just like, given that we just went through COVID. So all the people that don't remember 2008, they do remember COVID. They remember the fallout. They remember the impact. I mean, we're still dealing with it. Heck, here in Erie County, they just went back to mask mandates. It's insanity. But like, we're still in this moment here where some people are either thriving and other people are struggling. So you were on that side during the Great Recession of struggling. And a lot of people are there, but a lot of people, when they get to that low point in their life, like you did, where literally you're going through a divorce, you're staying, that's insane. I don't even want to repeat that. I don't want to bring back bad memories here, but I mean, that's just insanity. And 495,000, most people would just say, screw it, I give up. And they would do what I often call conform. They would conform to what other people tell them to do, what other people think they should do, because everybody's always quick to give advice, but it's always advice based on their failed realities, their failed dreams.
Yeah.
And it's rarely based on their successes. And I've dealt with this in my life, which is your family and friends. So when the easy path is to conform, you didn't do that. You decided, I've got to figure this out. I have to take responsibility of all these shitstorm of problems that just happened, and I need to create something. So let's talk about creation, because that's exactly what you did. And that's what every other person out there that's in a hard situation or has been in a hard situation, that's what they need to do. Don't conform, create, because that's always the path of the successful. So how did you start pulling out of this? I mean, that's a pretty bad situation. You can't do a professional career anymore. So like, what did you do?
It's interesting. And I just want to say, Chris, it's interesting because, I've told this story hundreds of times. I get invited on shows all the time. And it's actually like, I finally get it. Like, people are really, they always hone in on the same thing, which is like, man, you were so far down and you were in such a world of hurt. How did you muster the energy or the gumption or just the optimism to pivot and to do this next thing? And so I realized, okay, that must not be normal, or everybody wouldn't keep asking me about it, right? But at the time, and even still, it didn't feel abnormal. Bear in mind, that was only number 12 in a string of 12 failures. And it was kind of like each failure would have, there'd be some things that went right and some things that went wrong, right? And in this case, the things that went wrong, they were pretty big. It's kind of like an amplified, they were like an order of magnitude bigger than the previous failures. But the fundamentals of failure are, you try things, you learn things. Probably a lot of times more things go right than go wrong, but it's usually there's just like one thing that goes wrong. That's always the biggest lesson. That's also the biggest fallout, and the biggest consequence. And then you just go, okay, well, next time I just won't do that again. And I don't really remember at the time ever entertaining the idea of stopping or conforming. And I think it basically comes down to this. In life, probably the single most important question is, what are you most afraid of?
Yes.
What are you, and for me, what I was most afraid of, you said it, was conformity.
Good.
That word sounded, and still to this day sounds, like a spiritual and probably even physical death. I don't know, man. The idea of waking up one day and being a clockwork orange who marches to work in lockstep with everybody else and does the thing for 40 years so that he can hopefully have the thing that's insolvent anyways. It never made sense to me. I actually go through, just as surprised as people are that I didn't collapse and fall apart, is how surprised I am that anybody ever settles or conforms ever, period, because I'd rather die. And I don't know how, and I think we're all wired that way by nature. I'm so grateful that I wasn't there the day in kindergarten when everybody else got it stomped out of them. I'm glad I missed that day because it's still in me and I just won't quit.
Well, it's a unique thing that you mentioned there about, you think we're all born with that innate ability to create. We are. I mean, you can't deny that. Look at you have 4 children. I have a 18-month-old. Like, look at them. And you tell me they're pre-programmed to conform? No, they're programmed to create and be curious and go out there and tackle and conquer anything that you put in their way. But then all of a sudden life gets a hold of them and then starts saying, no, you can't do this. No, you can't dream that. No, you can't accomplish that. Do this, do that, do this. And it's crazy, Jeff, because it starts in the one place we think where people learn to create is exactly where they're learning to conform. And I hate to say it, but it's schooling.
It is.
Just the system and how it's created almost sets people up to fail or just to be that Clockwork Orange, that robot that just goes and trades hours for dollars. It's sickening. But, I love I always repeat this, but the Earl Nightingale, Strangest Secret in the World, where he goes deep into how he studied and tried figuring out the difference between success and failure. He said, there's got to be something to this. And at the end of his conclusion, that was it. The reason that out of 100 people, 95% of them don't fail or fail and don't succeed is they conformed. They didn't create. And the 5 that actually make it to be successful or wildly successful, all they did was create. The one thing they were born to do, that's all they had to do. It seems like the simplest path. So how the hell do we get off on that other sideways path? That's the mystery. And I think you just summed it up. So at this point, you started getting into online, like you were selling online. Let's talk about the next step, because I think there's several steps that you went through. We've talked about the step where you just failed and failed and failed and failed and failed. And I think it almost sounds like you kind of got addicted to it. You were kind of like, all right, well, that failed, and I learned here, and then I fail again, and
I wouldn't say I got addicted to growing and learning. And I mean, if you read like what's the whole like lean startup methodology, you read those books, you read 0 to 1, you read the lean startup, and it's all about failing as fast as possible and iterating from failure to failure to failure to failure, getting a little bit better each time. And I'd never read those books at the time, but I had read Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, and I knew that human beings are the literal fountainhead of all like creative energy in the world. And whether you believe that that's channeled through God or not, it doesn't matter. Ayn Rand was an atheist. I'm not. That part doesn't matter. At the end of the day, human beings are the nexus point where creative energy becomes tangible in the world. And when you believe that our existence is somewhere between futility and existential nonsense, in the absence of that, I can't abide spending a day of having accepted that there was nothing more than the hand I'm dealt. And I don't know how to explain it. I'm probably some sort of clinical something or other. I don't know if I have borderline personality disorder, or I'm a sociopath, or I'm, a narcissist, or I'm a malcontent, or I'm a hippie, or a utopian, or a beatnik. I don't know. I don't care. I just know I just don't want to settle and be ordinary. And I think at the end of the day, it's like the world will call your bullshit at some point. People say, I want all these things. I stand for all these things. Okay. Are you willing to live under a bridge if that's what it takes? Are you willing to be alone if that's what it takes for these principles you supposedly care so much about? I spent most of my life, and I think my wife knows this even now to this day, that I would die. Like literally, I'm insured. They can have the money. I will die before I settle in this world.
That's so important. And, you know, it brings me to a book, Becoming Your Own Banker. R. Nelson Nash talks in this one chapter about the arrival syndrome. And what you're basically saying is you'll never arrive. You know, so many people, I know too many people that have arrived at a certain level of success where they think they've gotten everything, they know everything, and they've accomplished everything they are. So all of a sudden they're just at this content point. I've watched every one of them nosedive like a 747 going straight down. Because once you arrive, what are you working for? Where's your passion? What's your, like, why would you do anything more if you've arrived? The only place to go is back down and start over from the bottom again. And that's beautiful that you said that. You would die before you ever arrive. You'll just keep going.
You know, Bob Proctor said something the other, like I found this a few months ago and I felt like a weight lifted, like, okay, I get it. I finally get what it was another step in making sense. You know how we have these like feelings that have just kind of been with us our whole life. It's like the ground underneath us that we've built our whole life on, but like until we fully understand it, it doesn't feel stable. And so Bob Proctor shed some light for me on something the other day that has added a lot of stability to my life. And he basically was talking about how human beings are like Homo sapiens sapiens is the only species that is born into natural disharmony with its environment. You know, penguins are born in penguin places to do penguin stuff. And as long as they do penguin stuff, they're always congruent with their instincts. And there's always some amount of peace. Even when a fawn is running away from a wolf, presumably deep down in its bones, it knows that it's doing deer stuff in deer places, and getting chased by a wolf is a deer thing to do, right? Human beings, like, we're screwed up from day one. We're never content. We're never in harmony with our environment. I mean, a lot of, you know, sci-fi is based around the idea that we're actually a virus. We're not a native organism to any ecosystem, right? And so what Bob Proctor was saying is the fact that humans are born into disharmony or incongruency with the natural world is a sign, it's a calling to use all those supernatural faculties that we've been endowed with. Things like discipline, grit, striving, ambition, love, all these things that you can't really make a ton of sense of in terms of either you know, kind of Darwinian biological self-perpetuation, or frankly, even a social contract. Why should I be letting the person who's weaker than me, why should I be helping them when there could be a food shortage and now I'll have to compete with them for provisions? Like, there's all these things about the human condition that are like, we don't make sense in the natural world. And we have all these supernatural faculties and qualities that we carry around. And most of us spend our whole life almost trying to avoid because it's messy and it feels like therapy. And Bob Proctor was like, those things are the answer. The problem is people trying to be in harmony in a natural environment that they're not really here. You know, you're in this world, but don't be of this world. And when he told me that, I was like, oh, okay. Here, I spent all this time worried that I was the crazy one. I'm not. The vast majority that's really more concerned, and I don't mean this to be like, you know, denigrating or like to put myself on a pedestal. This has been a hard life I've lived. You know, I talk a lot about the Greek myth of Cassandra, who was she was cursed to know the future, but to live in a world where nobody believed her. Wow. So she would go around warning people, hey, there's going to be a mudslide and your house is going to get leveled, or Zeus is going to wake up on the wrong side of the bed and hit you with a lightning bolt. And nobody would listen to her. And so she had to watch the people around her suffer and die because they ignored her. I kind of have always felt like, hey, and I know that I'm not the only one. You're the same way. Like there's those of us that are out there spreading this message that gets dismissed by the mainstream of like, no, that's not practical. Well, although your thing is hyper practical, frankly, you know, self-banking, which I'm a big fan of, and we can talk about that all day. But I've always felt like, and maybe this is how like mystics feel and like monks feel and stuff, that like there's this whole other world that's actually where what we're wired for. It's the world where we aren't born into disharmony, but actually it's the world where all of our dreams can come true, and the peace that surpasses human understanding is right there. Again, whether you go religious with it or not isn't the point. The point is to go unearthly. It's not where you take it, it's to get away from this earthbound, corporeal, materialistic, superficial, I'm worried what the Joneses think existence, and I don't know, I just don't know. Like I said, there must have been some day I was absent when they taught you that that's the stuff that's supposed to matter.
Yeah, and I think most of us are taught that, that we, got to be in harmony. We got to, just exist at this perfect level, and that's what we're always striving for. But we're not perfect. We shouldn't be striving for that. And God, it's just such a broken model out there. And you're right. Like whether it's what I do or what you teach with Entra, I mean, you're always fighting. Everybody fighting you. You're fighting to help save them, or like that one, or if you knew the future and you could help save people, but nobody would listen to you. I feel like that every day, teaching people the truth about money, but the whole life they've been lied to about money. So then they got to make a decision, blue pill or red pill, which is the right one and which one is the truth and which one is the lie. But if the thing you've been doing your whole life doesn't seem to be getting you where you want to be, and it just keeps self-defeating you, why wouldn't you try the other one? Why wouldn't you just understand and research it? But people don't even do due diligence anymore. They listen to other people say, "Oh, that's a scam," and then they go
on Reddit. The new word for due diligence is Reddit.
Oh, well, that's a great one. I don't even know how that's risen to be what it is, because like if you're in a world where you're trying to get the truth, then you go on to Reddit where it's pretty much the anti-truth. Like that's a pretty difficult pill for me to swallow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the answer. I just. The reason they don't do it is because, I think about the movie The Matrix a lot. Like, I'm sure you've seen it. Remember that scene where the guy is like basically saying the guy that he ends up betraying the whole crew.
Yeah.
And he's like, just put me back to sleep, man. He's like, I just want to be in a fancy restaurant, drinking a glass of wine, eating a steak, believing that it's real. I
just envisioned that entire part of the movie as you just did that. I remember him like with the fork and the thing and the wine.
Yeah. Unreal. And I don't know, man. It's like, maybe we don't have to talk about it this whole hour, but I live in it every day. I drive around and I look around and I feel, I hear Jim Morrison saying people are strange when you're a stranger. The world seems ugly when you're alone. Like, I don't know how to connect to this. I see around me, 2.5 hours a day spent on social media, 5 hours a day spent on sports and leisure. Like, we know that we're focusing on the wrong things, or we wouldn't spend so much time trying to escape them. Those are stats about the average American. Between sports, leisure, and social media, 7.5 hours a day in a fantastical non-reality that decays and subtracts value from your life.
And when you say sports, you mean just like watching sports?
Well, yeah, I don't mean playing. That would be exercise.
Because I was making sure we made that correlation, because I'm like, playing sports is awesome. Like going out and like being outside and like just getting
watching sports, watching serial TV shows, watching reality TV, watching our phone, basically watching screens for 7 hours a day.
I don't even turn our TVs on. We have a TV in almost every room in our house, and the only thing that's ever on is Baby First TV. Hey, I don't know. It's a strange world, but so there's largely part of the problem. We've literally created this false reality that we waste 7.5 hours on, but you didn't. So let's get back to like, where did things change? You're the $500,000 in debt, no job, living in, your wife who is trying to separate from you's mother or parents' house. Like, how do you then spin that to where you're at today, where you've got the craziest?
I gotta show you this. I gotta show you this too. So you can see this is my tax return from 2008.
Yeah.
See the number?
Negative $40,000. You did good that year. And negative you were filing
40,000.
And you were being a good boy, following the one filing that you should, the 1040, oh, God forbid the 1041. But yeah, hey, you lost 40 grand. Good job. What year was that again? 08?
That's from 08. So yeah, 09 is messy because yeah, I lost a lot, ended up losing a lot more. Like think about it. I paid off $495,000 in debt in 18 months as an internet marketer. But if you really think about that, the trippiest thing about the whole thing is I made $500,000. Bear in mind, I never made more than 40 grand, maybe 60 if you count like tips and cash and things I didn't have to report. I made about 50, 60 grand a year all through my 20s as a musician. All of a sudden, that's what I'm making in a month. And I don't get to keep a dime of it. So 18 months in, I made $500,000 and I'm still broke because I paid off all the debt. And that was what was weird, is sitting there like going, man, I am banking and I still have nothing to show for it. And I looked at it as like, okay, this is my penance. This is making sure.
Yes.
This is making sure, dude, this is making sure that when I come out the other side, I appreciate it and that I've learned the value of $1. And so anyway, I did. And, I don't know. I guess the question was like, what did I do? I mean, I started affiliate marketing, which is, I try not to overemphasize the specifics of what I was doing, because at that time I was an affiliate for some education programs I found online. In fact, one of them was the program where I first learned about infinite banking or self-banking. It was this kind of, at the time, very fringe. I mean, this concept has been very fringe for a long time. It's only recently become a lot more mainstream. It used to be something that only very wealthy people knew about. But there was a financial education company that taught that and lots of other strategies. And I was an affiliate for them. And I had a marketing funnel that I built that would sell tickets for their financial education programs. I was also an affiliate of a lot of digital marketing platforms, stuff that I was using to learn from. That was the Great Recession. So there were a lot of people coming online, just like I had, to learn how to, kind of learn about this new economy, stuff we take for granted now. And so I was an affiliate in a lot of those programs, but it doesn't really matter what program I was an affiliate for or what my funnels were selling. The point is, there's a set of skills that you can learn that involve, fundamentally they involve how to get the modern digital consumer to take certain actions or follow a certain behavioral path on digital media. So that could be anything from, installing let's say they're playing a game on their phone and you get those little banners that are about installing apps on your phone, and somebody's getting paid every time somebody downloads and installs an app. Maybe it's, going onto a website and buying a nootropic supplement or something for gut health. Somebody's getting paid every time somebody places one of those orders. Even on Amazon, 23% of all transactions on Amazon happen through affiliates. Somebody's getting paid when you buy a canoe to go camping with, or, maybe it's selling a course on the internet. Maybe it's setting up an e-commerce store. Maybe it's, building out a Facebook group and going live and selling a coaching program. Like the what doesn't matter. The how is what matters. It's this basic set of skills. And when you have these set of skills, honestly, it's kind of like being like a ninja or something. Like you can if you're a ninja, like if you know how to fight and like use guns and swords and throw bombs and stuff, you go to any country on earth and the government's going to hire you and they're going to pay you a lot of money. Right. And you probably don't even need a passport. When you have these digital marketing skills, obviously it's different from being a ninja. Nobody dies, thankfully, but you just have a completely different set of possibilities for your life. Like you can go live on a beach for a year if you want, or you can coach your kid's little league team and be making money between innings. Like life is just qualitatively different when you have these skills. And so I encourage everybody on this earth, like we all invest time in learning skills. Most of us at some point, we learned how to, flush out a septic system or repair an automobile engine or set up a, whole life policy. And that's a good one because it pays you residual income. But a lot of people, you know, some of us learn how to teach kids 9 months out of the year. Some of us learn how to, you know, I don't know, stitch belt buckles. Like, why not take some time and learn the skills that are the most valuable skills in the world based on where the economy is, and they give you the ultimate time and lifestyle freedom. Like, we spend so much time getting to where we are, and we're so unwilling to spend a little more time getting out of where we are.
Yeah.
I just wasn't.
That's well said. So these different skills, are those the 3 Ps, or like what are these skills? And those skills applied back when you started doing this, things were a little different. I mean, I'm not going to say the internet was new, but it was still, there's a lot of opportunity, and there is today, but a lot of people think that, oh, that's already been done, that wouldn't work today. I hear that all the time. Well, that worked then, it can't work today. It's like, you know, and also people all think that they got to spend a ton of money to make a bunch of money, but it doesn't sound like you had any money to be able to get into this and start, you know, building these funnels. Well, so where was the traction?
You got to spend a ton of something. You know, this idea of, oh, it takes a lot of money to make a lot of money. 100% true when you're talking about investing.
Yes. If
you want to make $1 million, starting, you know, going and buying $1,000 worth of Shiba Inu is a disastrous pipe dream. It takes $1 million to make $1 million through passive investing. It doesn't take $1 million to make $1 million through a business, you know, but you're going to have to spend time and energy instead of money. Right. You know, so for me, it was, you know, I still played a few gigs a week. I could play 2 or 3 gigs a week and my hand would hold up. And basically, and then I would go to the gym. I did hold that habit together, or I would go for a run at least. So every day I would have between 30 and 60 minutes related to my health. And 2 or 3 times a week, I would go play a gig for usually 4 to 6 hours. And virtually every other minute of my life for the better part of 2 years, I was on the internet learning these skills, learning to write. You know, and this was before ClickFunnels. This was before lead pages. So I still have some of the books on my shelf. Oh, here's one of them. You know, PHP and MySQL for Dummies. There were no funnel builders at that time. I started teaching myself how to build websites. I started teaching myself how to set up WordPress sites. I started teaching myself how to create my own WordPress plugins. I started teaching myself how to do all this fancy stuff on funnels that you see, like, oh, a 48-hour countdown timer. Well, that sounds really easy if you have some off-the-shelf software with a timer option where you just click a mouse and it enables it. But what if you have to code that from scratch? And you want it to be red instead of yellow, and you want it to be big instead of small, and you want it to hover on the right instead of the left, and you want it to move when the mouse and the page scrolls down. Like, that's all, there's code for all that, right? So I was in the trenches for just thousands of hours teaching myself not only the technology, but also the copywriting, how to write words that sell, how to be persuasive so that, you know, I can either get on the phone with 100 people and sell 100 products, or I can write a sales letter or create a video sales letter that sells 1,000 products and I never have to talk to anybody. Yeah. But there's skills there. It doesn't just happen. Just because you speak English doesn't mean you speak direct response copywriting. So I had to learn that. I had to learn, you know, direct response design. I had to learn all these little, you know, buzzwords and keywords and things like, you know, foveal proximity. And I realized that, oh, well, if I put a picture of a human face on my screen, it needs to be within peripheral vision proximity to the call to action button or the form that I'm trying to get them to fill out, because their eyes are naturally going to go to the face on the screen. And as long as the form is within their field of vision based on where they're looking, they're more likely to see. And I can triple conversions on a page just by putting a face within foveal proximity of my opt-in form. And like, that's just one silly little thing I learned. But like, you know, it's like same thing. If I wanted to be a chemist, I would have had to learn all this stuff. But I wanted to be a direct response online marketer who could do what he wants, live where he wants, make what he wants, go where he wants, and have the life he wants. And I had to learn the skills. And these skills are right out there. I mean, I have a YouTube channel that teaches half these skills. And it's funny, I find these videos online of, you know, kid falls off skateboard and cracks skull. And it gets, you know, 74 million views. And I have a video that's like how to set up a high converting, you know, sales funnel. And it has like 1,100 views. And it's like, I try not to be cynical. I love everyone, but I also out of love, sometimes just want to save them from themselves. And that's where it gets hard, you know?
Yeah, well, definitely, skateboarding and cracking your skull and 7 million views. It's not something you can repeat over and over and scale. And if you do, you're going to be a vegetable. Trust me, from a skateboarder and snowboarder, you don't want to do that one. So might as well put your time into something like what you are. But you're right. Like but this happened quick. Like from 08 to 09, we'll call that the failure period. Then, up to how long was it taking for you to learn how to do all this code where that started monetizing for you? Like, what was that next journey after you really dove in? And you obviously became fascinated with it because you just kept going with it and learning and applying. But I'm trying to paint this time chronological picture. Not that time's the important thing, but when people are listening to this, if they wanted to change their life, their situation, start creating their financial future, like these are the things they need to do. And you got to understand, like, here's the commitment. You're either going to invest dollars, successful people do two things. They invest money or time. If you don't have the money, well, you better double down on the time. If you don't have the time, well, you better have a lot of money. I mean, listen, like there is no magic formula. No one's going to sit there and, help you and save the day. The cavalry's not coming this time. So right. You're all you got. So like, what does that commitment look like for the average person?
I think people get really overwhelmed by the idea of all this stuff that they would have to do. And I think it's a lot easier way to look at, to accomplish X, I would have to do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, right? And that sounds overwhelming. And I don't know. How much easier would it be if we just said to accomplish X, I would need to say no to these 5 things that already exist in my life?
Wow.
That's that's addition by subtraction, right?
It's the most powerful thing that nobody's taught is how to say no so you can say yes to the right thing. Because there is only so many hours in the day. I keep going. I'm sorry. I got really excited about that.
It's so true. And so, I mean, on the one hand, people say, oh, Jeff, you spent all this time learning all this stuff and And it's like, yeah, but what I really did right was instead of being down, boohoo, woe is me, let me go seek comfort by, hanging out at my friend's house all the time, talking about my problems, getting validation. Let me start, let me start drinking or doing drugs and using up day after day of just being a zombie or being checked out, or let me lose myself in watching, or reading or let's say watching like all 8 seasons of Arrested Development on repeat or like whatever. I just didn't say yes to any of the natural diversions that a lot of us do. And in the void, in the vacuum, I filled it with learning and looked at from that point of view, it really wasn't that hard because if you have time, you're going to do something with it. Mm-hmm. Just don't allow yourself to do the things with it that don't move you in the direction of your goals. And by default, you'll end up doing things that do. And that's the only filter. You asked about the 3 Ps. The 3 Ps they're not a marketing method. They're not a how-to. They're just a framework for looking at life. Physical, personal, and professional, excellence or success, or those are the 3 buckets of life. I used to say physical, personal, and professional excellence. Then I realized that the word excellence is intimidating for some people. So we made a decision like, oh, let's back off on talking so much about excellence and we'll talk more about fulfillment or something. These are like the semantic games you have to play to like accommodate people's feelings about themselves. And it's silly because at the end of the day, just be excellent or don't bother. But physical, personal, and professional is just a lens to look at your life through. And at any given moment, like right now, what are we doing? Is this conversation advancing my life physically? No, not really. Although we've touched on the importance of exercise. Personally, yes, because I feel like I'm building a relationship with a like-minded, peer and contemporary and somebody that, we might go on to have a great friendship or relationship or do business together, whatever. And is it advancing my life professionally? Hell yeah, man. We're making great content that we're both going to continue to use to build a business with. So this checks the box. I am getting value in this moment in at least one of those 3 categories: physical, personal, and professional. At every single moment of my life, I should be able to immediately identify which of the 3 Ps I'm serving. And if I can't, I better do something different. And that's all the 3 Ps is it's a heuristic for saying, is this time and energy well spent? And, you know, I mean, even I watch Netflix shows at night, but you know what I never do? You will never find me watching TV by myself. I watch TV with my wife because that's our time when we unwind. And you know what we do? We put the captions on so that we can talk without being like, hey, shh, I'm trying to listen. We can talk. And if we still want to follow what's going on in the TV show, we can catch it out of the corner of our eyes with the captions. But we always watch TV together, and we never watch it without the captions on, because it's actually our time to sit and talk, but also have something else going on, so that we're not only sitting and talking because it's late in the day. And if we're tired and we just want to sit, we want that to be an option too. But like, even my Netflix watching is calculated as part of meeting a need in a personal relationship for some decompression time where talking is optional but not required with my wife. And so, you know, that's how I scan my life and say, like, if and you build it like a muscle, it gets to almost like an instinct. If I find myself starting to almost have like a panic attack, like when I'm having to wait at like doctor's offices or like in lines at the bank and stuff, I start to like wig out. I start to want to crawl out of my skin because I'm going, okay, physically, nothing's happening right now. Personally, nothing's happening right now. Professionally, nothing's happening right now. Oh my God, nothing's happening right now. This is time I can't get back. And I'll find something to do. I'll get on my phone and I'll create a piece of content, or I'll go through my task list or my ClickUp and see if there's something I can check off while I'm waiting in line, because that idle time, you know, you and I live in the world of compound returns, right?
Yes.
You know the value of time that doesn't produce a return, or the opportunity cost of that time. To me, it's, you have to develop an allergy in your life for time that's not well spent.
I love that you said that, because as you're talking about that, I'm like envisioning some things that have happened in the last 2 weeks. And I thought there was something wrong with me. I really did. Like my wife would say, hey, you know, my mom wants us to go to Sam's Club, and, you know, because that's where mom gets her food. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll be a sport and I'll go. And I'm sitting there, and none of those 3 things were checking. And I start freaking out. I actually start becoming an asshole. I start being fidgety. I didn't know what to do. And then, you know, when I get on the phone, when the wife's pushing the cart, you know, because I'm like, I got to do something. Then I get yelled at, and I'm like, there is clearly something wrong with me. But I'm glad you just told me that there's really not anything wrong with me. It's just I'm subscribing to these 3 Ps, and I definitely have that uncomfortable, weird, I don't even know what you call it, period when I don't have something productive happening. And I don't know. Sometimes I think, maybe, is that not how everybody operates? Does everybody not like have those weird moments when they're sitting idle and nothing's happening in their life, and they think like, this can't happen, like I can't operate in this environment? I don't know. Maybe like you were saying earlier, like that is the creators, and then the ones, I don't want to call them conformists, but the ones that conform for their lives and just follow the path of least resistance. Maybe they don't feel the same way. I'm not like, I'm pretty, what would the word be? I'm pretty egalitarian in terms of human potential. I realize we're not going to all have the same outcome, and we don't all have the same desires. But again, to what Bob Proctor said, why would we have even been given the capacity to understand God, or to ask metaphysical questions, or to dream, or to wonder, or to dig deep and do hard things that don't serve us in the short term? Why would any of those attributes exist as part of the composition of a human if it was not our calling to be that way? Great question.
So I don't think there's anybody that's not supposed to do those things. I just think that we have this counterbalancing. Actually, I don't know if counterbalancing is the right word. We have this coexisting, vein of human experience that's all based around fear. It's all based on the ethereal, no, what's the word? The kind of the evanescent nature of things, that life is short, life is fleeting, life is finite. We're going to lose. Ultimately, the story of our life is going to be the story of losing things over time. And so we have this this delusion that we persist under day to day of like, I need to save, I need to hoard, I need to take, I need to corral, I need to close off. And, you know, that's the human condition. I mean, Shakespeare wrote plays about this, like,
Yes,
what are we, you know, to be or not to be? That is the question, right? To be as I am, to be a short-term animalistic, deteriorating body, or to be an eternal, you know, perpetual liberated mind, and to choose one over the other, because to some degree they're binary and they're zero sum, and you have to say yes to one by saying no to the other, right? I mean, this is why the ascetics and the monks and the prophets and everyone else, they have to go out and suffer in order to find enlightenment. You can't say yes to both. And for me, it was never about choosing suffering, but it was about not resisting suffering. Like, if life has endowed me with a certain set of priorities, and my priority has always been freedom and self-determination. I just want to live a life that I get to choose. And clearly there's nothing wrong with that, or else it would not have been my given proclivity in the first place. Like, I don't think God places upon us desires for things that are wrong. I think we can have desires for things get perverted or corrupted by a world that has negative forces in it. And then we feel this conviction to need to find our way back. But our default settings, like, you can't think badly of your default settings without thinking badly of yourself by default. That's called shame. That doesn't serve anyone. And so it's like, hey, I want freedom. That must be cool. That must be a good thing to want. So I'm going to accept the consequences of living a life where I keep first things first. And if that means I have to suffer for a time, so be it. And I think as a society, you look at what's going on in the world right now, and I try not to get political, but you can pretty much define our world right now as people maneuvering to reduce what could be very legitimate and even healthy or productive suffering. As an economy, as a society right now, there's a certain amount of suffering. I mean, you're an economics guy.
Yeah. Like,
what do we actually need to do to get off of this money printing, quantitative easing, hyperinflationary monetary nonsense that's going on in this country? What do we actually need to do as a civilization? We need to invite about 10 years of suffering, so that we can correct.
Yeah, we need to go to Austrian economics and allow the markets to correct the way that they're supposed to, instead of this stimulus that keeps kicking the can and modern monetary theory. None of that works, and it's going to create think of it as a tidal wave, right? You can either have big waves that create damage, and yes, you got to fix things, or you can have a tidal wave that just wipes out everything. We are creating that tidal wave right now, and there's no stopping it at this point.
Yeah,
but it was so easy
a little bit of suffering.
Suffer was the answer.
The Great Depression.
Yeah, the Great Depression will be what, I don't even know if it's going to.
But you can't sell that. You can't sell that in the modern world. Not in the modern world. You know,
I'm trying, and I don't care if people want to listen, because if one person listens and 100 million don't, it's that one person I'm trying to change.
And if my story can stand for anything, if I can achieve anything in this world, because it's real easy for people to say, "Oh yeah, Jeff, but look at you, you're really suffering, right? You got a good business, and you got a great family, and you got a great life, and da da da." I have what I have because I was willing to suffer. And because when my choice was suffer or compromise, I accepted the suffer. That's why I have what I have now. And the reason I will spend the rest of my life telling my story and maybe looking like I'm seeking attention is because I lived it. And I lived it for a reason. And the greatest meaning that my life can have at this point is if I can get a lot of people to understand, like, okay, I already suffered, but the more people understand that the rewards that I reap now are a direct result of a willingness to suffer out of legitimate commitment to real principles, and not willing to compromise the way everybody in my life was telling me to. Jeff, get a job. Jeff, get off your high horse. Jeff, don't be a martyr. Jeff, stop being, get out, get your feet on the ground, get your head out of the clouds. Don't be an idealist. What do you think you are? Some kind of modern, whatever, like nomadic hero, like you're Don Quixote or something. Like I heard it all, man. But the fact that I was willing to stay true to my principles, and I believe that human freedom and human creativity and human industry are the real reasons we are created, and that comfort is a soporific and a temptation that will distract and ultimately destroy our greatest nature. And the fact that when it counted in the crucible, I stayed true to that is why I have everything I have now. And so I will spend the rest of my life pointing that out to as many people as will listen, because like you just said, if I can reach one person, and I know, and I've reached more than one person, I see it in our groups. There's people that are like, I am doing things now because of hearing Jeff's story and working with Entre, and I'm not trying to take all the glory. I have a great team that helps us do this, but there are people now that are saying on a daily basis, I am doing things that I never imagined in a million years that I could do. And if you ask yourself why didn't they imagine they could do those things? I saw a testimony. We just got a testimonial back this morning from our editing team, and it was this guy. His name's Jordan, great guy. Used to be I've met him at our events, and I love the guy to death. Used to be a lineman, meaning he would go up and work on high voltage power lines, and like they would get cut down in a storm, and he would have to go stitch them back up. It's like one of the most dangerous jobs in the world, right? And when he found us, that I think he made six figures doing it.
Sure. And
so he absolutely believed putting my life on the line to try to maintain this broken ass power grid that passes for progress in America, and literally risking that my kids end up orphaned just so that I can eke by at my 95 to 100 grand so that I can tell myself I'm doing well. He literally thought that was the sum total of what was possible for his life. And my question isn't, oh, yay for Jeff, I told him otherwise. My question is, why the hell did it have to be me to tell him otherwise? Why wasn't it his teachers? Why wasn't it his guidance counselors? Why wasn't it his parents? Why wasn't it anybody else in his life saying, hey man, you know how I know you're made for more than this? Because you're a created being, and you were created with this schism in your mind to be in this world, but not of the world. And you wouldn't have all those higher faculties if you weren't meant to go after them. Why am I the first person that told this wonderful 35-year-old man this narrative about what was possible for his own life?
That's a great question. And it's one we should all be asking. Why is it that we have to wait for sometimes hitting the rock bottom before we actually seek the answers, the truth? And that's when you find it. I mean, everybody's journey is different. Maybe this 35-year-old lineman, luckily he found you, which maybe wasn't a low point, but you struck something instead of him having a tragic event that maybe didn't take his life. Maybe if he had died, it would have been better than what happened from his job, that then he had to seek the truth. I don't know. So many of us have different paths that we're on, but I wish that we just found it earlier. I wish there was just some methodology to allow us to see the truth and to find what is possible, because that's it. Like I always say this, I say this all the time. Whatever we ask of life, life will give us. Mm-hmm. Sounds so simple, right? Like if that one statement, everybody listening to this can be like, oh, that's cool. Whatever I ask of life, life will give me. And they start asking, and then it doesn't happen immediately. Like, see, that was bullshit. Can we talk a little bit about, escaping the broken system, which is, your book, and then a little bit about Entre, because what does Entre, what truth does that share? And how have you gotten so much traction? I mean, 200, and this is probably old, 200,000 students have studied this and learned how to grow this?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty surreal, honestly. I mean, you mentioned the book, I'll start there. So yeah, Escaping the Broken System, which is, the subtitle is break free from how to break free from the rat race and create your dream life in the modern world. And it really is, it's part story, because I have had a life where I broke out of the system, and it started early. I mean, I dropped out of high school because I recognized early on high school is job training. It's a euphemism for job training, right? They're preparing me, you know, and I remember somebody telling me once when I was a kid, they said there's only 4 environments in the world where bells ring and people move: schools, factories, prisons, and military camps.
Wow. Never thought about that.
And that hit me hard. And I was young. I was probably so young that they shouldn't have told me that, because it ruined me. It ruined me forever on school. I was like 10 years old. And from that day forward, I was like, oh, I'm in prison. This is a prison camp, right? Like, I don't want to be here. Why? And he said, oh, well, I'm in prison. Why am I here? Did I commit a crime? No. Am I being prepared for something? Maybe. Is it like, you know, is it like a boot camp or something? But what am I being prepared for? Wait, I'm being prepared for the life of all of me and my friends' parents. That's why I'm here. Being, you know, standing up and going to my locker in between classes and carrying around a 40-pound bag of books, like freaking getting scoliosis. Like, this is why I'm here. No, I don't want to, I refuse. And so I was like always having discipline problems. And, you know, finally, junior year, I was just done. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. This is stupid. And so I dropped out of school. And my point being, my life has been this kind of series of rejecting the broken system. I didn't have to escape it because I didn't enroll into it in the first place. Like, but for most people now, they're like, well, yeah, Jeff, but I'm 45. What do I do now? So I wrote a book called Escaping the Broken System. And so it's partly my story, but it's also a lot of lessons I learned along the way. See, I was shown things, like I said, in my early 20s. I was on the regular payroll of half a dozen billionaires who would hire me on a, you know, a couple times a year to come play their parties at their house. So like I was hanging out, I mentioned Tillman, you know, Jim, and I'm not saying like, you know, I mean, look, this was 25 years ago or 20 years ago. You call up Jim Crane today and be like, hey, you remember that piano player that used to play your Christmas party every year in like 2004? Look, this guy owns the Houston Astros. He's got other things. He may not even remember who I was, but for 3 or 4 years there, I played his Christmas party every year. Right. You know, Bob McNair, the guy that owned the Houston Texans. I have a story about when I met Bob McNair in my book. And because I was the piano player and I was invited into these people's homes, a lot of times for relatively small, intimate gatherings. I mean, you know, T. Boone Pickens, who's a wildcatter, you know, oil guy, probably at his peak, his net worth was probably close to $2 billion. The football stadium at Oklahoma State is T. Boone Pickens Stadium. It's named after him. So anyway, I played his 80th or 85th, I can't remember, birthday party. And it was his 80th with him and like 6 of his friends, just hanging out in a small room, playing piano, taking requests, yucking it up, mingling with these freaking billionaires sitting at a table. And so I had all these conversations in my early 20s with these people that had built these massive empires that employed 10,000 or 50,000 people. And, you know, they were all publicly listed companies. And I would just talk to these guys and I would ask them, what is it like? Like I recognized that they held some truth that I was never going to get from my teachers or my college professors. Right. And I would ask them like about life, and and story after story after story. It was always about doing things differently. I mean, if I could sum up all the advice I ever got from billionaires, it was basically, yeah, whatever most people tell you, do the opposite. That's the general advice I got from the richest people on earth. And so I've always just kind of done the opposite of what everybody tells me. But that's, you know, that's what it takes. I guess we live in a world where if you do what most people do, you're going to have what most people have. And we look through human history and say, okay, has there ever been a time when most people were happy? You know, the general, what's it called? The General Society Survey. I think it's published by NORC, which is one of the largest and most established independent research institutions in the world. It's based at University of Chicago. And every year, it's called the General Social Survey. Every year they publish the General Social Survey. And one of the main stats is how happy are people? And it hovers in terms of people that self-report as being, quote, very happy. It hovers, I think it's maxed at like 25% in the 40 years they've been doing it. And it's the most prosperous 40 years in the history of the world, in the most prosperous country in the history of the world. And we're still capping out at like 25% happiness. 2020, No, in 2019, the numbers were reported in 2020. It was at 14%. So it had gone down further, and that was pre-COVID. So what is it now?
Oh, wow.
5%, 8%? Like we're at less than 10% happiness now in this world. So how on this earth does anybody wake up in the morning and go, oh, I have an idea. I'm going to do what everybody else does so I can get the result that everybody else gets, knowing full well we live in a world where most people aren't happy. So just at the very least, do the opposite just for shits and grins. Like wake up one day and instead of getting in your car and driving to work, get in your car and drive to the foot of a mountain and go hike up to the top of the mountain and make sure you take some water and sit on a rock for 4 hours and ponder the meaning of life. Just fucking do that for one goddamn day in your fucking life, man. Just once. You have every other day to go back to what everybody else does. Try it one time. It might get you fired. If it does, that's a good thing. It definitely won't kill you. If it does, it's because you got yourself so out of shape, leading up to that point. Maybe you should have, hit the gym a time or two. Like, I just don't get it, man. I don't know how you caught me on this day. I'm like so worked up today.
This is good. This is really good because this is what people need to hear, man.
I have like a lot of joy in my life. I don't know why I seem so on edge, but
because you go out in public every day and you see what's happening out there. And that's probably why, because you know that there's a better life, a happier life, a better, easier way where people can do it if they would just get out of that 7.5 hours that they blow on completely useless things that do nothing to change their future outcome. Nothing. And I got to go back to that billionaire, that 85-year-old billionaire that you played at. 6 of these guys in a room. I want everybody that's listening to this, just envision, right? You have the opportunity to sit with 6 billionaires and ask them anything you want because you're the entertainment. You can ask them anything and they will give you the honest to God truth. And they tell you that you should do the opposite of everything you've been taught your whole life. What is your life? What are you going to think from that point on? Yeah.
I mean, what you do is a great example. I mean, the concept of using properly constructed insurance policies to build self-perpetuating banking vehicles. I mean, I just bought my wife a car with money that I borrowed from my own bank because like I said, I was fortunate in 2008, I became an affiliate for a company that taught this strategy and people thought, I mean, I can only imagine what you get because you're like very visible around this strategy. But at the time, people thought it was insane. And here I am, 12, 13 years later, I just bought my wife a freaking Lamborghini with money I borrowed from my own banking policy. Yeah. Like it works really well. And that's a great example of how you can show people this is a very logical thing. This is a very sane thing. But they're like, yeah, but that's not what I was told. And it almost produces an unreasonably like aggressive response. Because it's like, oh, well, if I accept that there's validity to that, that means I have to accept that there's invalidity to what I've been told my whole life. And where else might that be true? Oh my gosh, I don't want to deal with those consequences or those implications, right? So they just got to shut you down. Yeah,
and they do. And I mean, listen, I hear it every day. Like the other day, I try not to read a lot of the comments on my post, but I put a post up about cars, how I buy cars using the system. Just last night, I just put a deposit down in another car because when you learn how money works and you learn how to buy cars, but every car you buy, you get all the money back for the car and all you changed was one thing and that's where your money went first. Like going out and buying a car has a whole different meaning. I'm not the car guy, but I do like cars. And it's just like, I can buy any car I want and it doesn't matter what the car costs. As long as I can afford to make payments back to my bank, I get all the money back. Instead of giving all the money to M&T Bank or Key Bank or any of the other institutional banks, which is what everybody else seems to do, they just give the money to the bank and then they got a car that's worth next to nothing and they're upside down. But some reason, people like the guy the other day on the post that I put up, he said, I'm dumber now after watching this. And my comment back was, wow, you must have been pretty dumb to start with. That's exactly what I said back to him. Because like, how else am I going to respond to that? Getting totally off topic with it, but it's just like escaping from the broken system. The title of that book, so powerful because That's exactly what we all need to do, but it's the biggest thing that everybody's going to tell you not to do because they're all plugged into the broken system, and that's what they accept as reality. That's what they accept as being normal. There's no fucking normal behind that. It's insanity is what it is.
It doesn't come out. I just submitted the manuscript, which frankly is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, honestly, is writing that book. I mean, it's 96,000 words, and it's funny. I spent a year, quote, writing the book. And then about a month before the publisher deadline, I looked at it and I was like, this is not good. I'm not pleased with this. And I actually ended up basically writing the whole thing in like 4 weeks. But it was after a year. It's so typical of the human condition, right? I spent a year writing the book to produce some mediocre stuff. And then I got really serious about it. And in a month, I wrote a 100,000 word book.
Exactly how it works.
And it's like, oh, I was capable of that the whole time. Why did I wait a year? Why did I pussyfoot around for a year? Why didn't I just show up that way on day one? Anyway, so that's the story there, but it doesn't come out till August 2nd of 2022. So, and it's, you know, we've got a national publisher deal. It's going to be in, I think, 1,500 airport bookstores and, you know, the major, you know, Barnes and Noble. It's like a real deal. It's not some, and there's nothing wrong with self-publishing on Amazon, but I've just been really blessed. I actually got a major publisher behind it. So
that's awesome. But we got a lot of really impatient people that probably are listening to this show that don't want to wait till August to get your stuff. So let's talk about Entre, because this is pretty freaking exciting. Entre Institute, just high level view. What is this thing?
So we call ourselves the School for Entrepreneurs. And it's essential. Like, look, there's a lot of places you can go online to learn about maybe some digital marketing or how to build a sales funnel, or, you know, it's like a lot of gurus and a lot of courses and a lot of even online classes. And then they have a lot of these marketplaces like Udemy and Coursera, and there's these platforms like Teachable, and like you can kind of like hodgepodge your way through learning anything. You go to masterclass and Steph Curry will teach you how to dribble a basketball. Right. Or Kevin. Well, actually, I think they got rid of the course with Kevin Spacey because he, you know, had some indiscretions.
A little Spacey.
Yeah. But there was a course with Kevin Spacey. James Patterson will teach you how to write a fiction novel. Like, okay, great. But what do people actually want in life? They want, you know, and by the way, it's been scientifically proven the three people say I want to be happy. It's actually been proven the three things that you can spend money on to make yourself happy. One is creating memorable experiences. Absolutely. Two is investing in things that free up your time. So like literally hiring someone to mow your lawn so you don't have to do it will like create more joy than like, you know, $50,000 shopping spree at the mall or something. And the third thing is investing in helping other people, bringing joy and easing the burden of other people. Those are the three things. So there is a proven scientific statistical correlation between receiving money and doing certain things with it and actually achieving what I think is the point of life, not from the standpoint of, oh, the point is to be happy, but that the experience of joy is a signal that indicates that we're in alignment with our created purpose. So I'm not saying the point of life is to feel joy, but I'm saying joy indicates that we're getting closer to the point of life. And if those are the three things we can do with money that statistically produce joy, it must be a good thing to get money and do those things. And so Entre essentially basically says, okay, we're going to teach people how to actually produce those outcomes. Oh, at the end of the day, all people want from education is outcome. The root of the word educate is ducare, the Latin word for to lead. People they don't want to be led aimlessly. They want to be led to a place that they want to go. Education is about a place that people are trying to go. And we have all these marketplaces and all these learning platforms online that, yeah, they're loaded up with hundreds or thousands of courses, but they don't start with the end in mind of where is this person trying to go? And the only ones that do are like skills development and professional development to say, oh, well, where you want to go must be to get a raise or a promotion in your job. There's never been a school that starts with liberated entrepreneurial outcomes that people are trying to achieve. Hey, I want to build a business. Why? Because I want to exit the business, or I want to achieve financial freedom, or I want to be able to automate the business, or I want to be able to staff the business and transcend the business so I don't have to be in it every day. Like, what is the actual quality of life outcome that people want that they rightfully see starting a business as a pathway to get to? Let's start with that end in mind and work backward and build educational paths that get them all the way there. And that's what Entre Institute is. We're the first institute of higher learning in the world that's exclusively dedicated to entrepreneurial businesses and entrepreneurial skills. And we launched in 2019. We're not even 2.5 years old. And like you said, 200,000 students. We're the fastest growing education company in the world, as far as I know, completely bootstrapped. I started the whole thing with 20 grand on a credit card. I spent about a year putting out social content, telling people what's possible in the modern world for their life. And fortunately, enough people were interested, and, it's kind of taken off. I mean, I'm not going to say, oh, it just took off. Like, it's been the hardest thing I've ever done. I've probably worked on it, I don't know, 10,000 hours in the last 3 years. But what else am I going to do? Like we said earlier, if you just say no to enough things, then you got all this space to fill and you do something worthwhile with it.
If I'm not mistaken, you said 10,000 hours. Not that that's an arbitrary number, but I believe in the book Outliers, that's the magic number. I believe, if I'm correct, 10,000 hours is the magic number. Now, I want everybody to really articulate what 10,000 hours means. That's not just like, oh, I'm going to dabble in this. No, that's you are out for a purpose. And like those three things, as you were saying, those three things that, bring us joy. I listened to each one intently and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And I was in my mind thinking of that actual moment where I created an experience and how much joy I felt. And then, when I hired, just recently, we hired somebody to clean our house. Not that we can't clean our house. It's not that it's hard, but I did it because I'm always busy working. When I come home, I like enjoying a clean house. The joy that I get when I come home, and she does once a week. When I come home and I smell the house clean and I see everything clean, I can't really even explain it. And it's so stupid, but that joy. And the very last one is single-handedly the one that is so missed, but so vitally important. And that is solving other people's problems, doing for others instead of doing for yourself. Like the joy you get from, I just paid for this guy's dinner at a taco place. I don't even know why I did. I sat down and he said hello to me. Now, I don't know how any of you feel. This is COVID. I live in New York. People just don't say hi anymore. I sat down and he said hello. And I almost looked at him like, who are you? But I didn't. I was like actually enjoying that. And at the end, I don't know why the bartender slid his bill over and he didn't just pick it up right away. And I cued the bartender, bring me my bill. And I said, can you put his on mine? He kind of fought it in the beginning. I said, no, please. And he said, why? Why would you buy my dinner? Like I've been drinking. I had a bunch of food. I said, it doesn't matter what it costs. He said, well, why? I said, I don't know, man. You said hi. Like literally, that was my only freaking response. The joy, the pure joy I had in paying for this man's $76 meal. You couldn't give me $500,000 and get that same joy by giving me the money. You could hand me a suitcase of $500,000, say, hey man, do whatever you want with it. I'd be like, oh wow, but that $76 meal, then the look on his face and just what happened after, like there is no money that I can think of that gave me that joy. Like, why aren't we all just tapping into that? Because that is real. That is incredibly real. I wrote an $8 check. I know this sounds stupid. I got a thing in the mail. I don't even remember what it was. It was a donation. It came in a little envelope. And one of the check boxes was 18, or no, I'm sorry, I did 16. It was 8, 16, and like 20 some dollars, weird numbers. I just picked the one in the middle and I just wrote a check for it. Writing that check gave me so much fucking joy. And it was a $16 check. I don't even know who I mailed it to. I don't know. I just wrote a check for it. But like, those are the little things in life that bring joy. But yet we're out there seeking joy in all these other things that don't really bring joy. They actually bring misery. I don't even know, man. Like everything you're saying just rings way too true to me. And I just can't understand why why do you only have 200,000 students? Like, dude, get going. Like, hurry the hell up. 10,000 hours?
I know, right?
We need 20,000 now, Jeff. Come on, man. You're slacking.
That's how I feel. It's hard. Well, in this time of year, 'tis the season to defer our personal growth to the new year. Wait so we can make a resolution. So
'tis the season to buy a gift of this. So do you actually have a holiday special, a funnel somebody can go to where I can actually sign this up for somebody
we don't
else?
do holiday specials. I actually made a post about this the other day, and I got, got a bunch of haters like you do. I said, look, we can tell everything about what you think about your brand by how you approach Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And I'm like, I'm not going to give a discount. Why would I tell my audience, hey, the rest of the year it was overpriced, you should buy it now?
That's a good way to look at it. And now I'm pissed because my team just did a holiday offer for our 3-day event, and now I'm pissed that I did it.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I say this stuff, and I just speak my truth. I'm not here to judge or make anybody wrong. For me, it's like, I believe so much in what I'm doing. Like, if I want to give some added value this time of year, like, hey, it's the holidays, I'm going to do a one-time bonus masterclass or something. Like, I'm fine with that. But I just, I was on a particular edge that day, because there's this new trend going around of like these marketers that have been creating courses and the people that I consider sort of in my competitive realm. I don't think of them as my competition, but it's like the other people that take up the share of wallet for people in the business education world, right? And the entrepreneurial education world. So they're like the course creators and the gurus and these people. And there seems to be this trend lately of like, oh, I'm going to give away my life's work, my entire over of training, for $37. It's, $492,000 worth of courses that I've built over the last 20 years. And you can get it all now for one time, $29 or something. It's like, really? You really? Are you? So now that you don't need the money.
I saw that ad, just so you know. I know.
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of them. There's more than one, actually.
Oh, man, I only saw one, and it was almost.
And it's like, oh, so now that you don't need the money, are you saying that's actually what it was worth all along? Or are you saying, well, 10 years ago when I did this and the information was really timely and relevant, you could pay a lot of money for it. But now that it's 10 years old and it's not that useful, I'm going to give it away I'm going to fire sale it on the cheap. Like, what are you telling me as your audience member? Whatever $29 you stand to gain for me, you're going to lose a lot more than that in respect for me. And so I just don't operate that way at this time of year. I just kind of back away. I like this time of year. I look at November and December as like the weekend of the year. What Saturday and Sunday are to most people, November and December are on an annual basis, right? It's like 2 out of 12 months. We're going to back off for 17% of the year because it's the holiday. Oh, Halloween came. Okay, let's just ride it out through the end of the year. That's 17% of your life happens in those 2 months inside of a world where you're already taking 28.5% of every week off on the weekends. So we spend 10 months taking 28.5% of the week off called Saturdays and Sundays. And then we take the additional 17% at the end of the year off in the form of November and December. I mean, you understand the value of compounding, an incremental improvement in a compound return. So if most people are losing 28% a week of their time coupled with 17% a year of their time, because they're just sort of checking out, what edge do I gain if I just work a half day every Saturday? What edge do I gain if I don't drop my prices in November and December? And in fact, I push a little bit harder because it's easier to gain ground when everyone else is flat footed.
Well, can I answer it? Because Albert Einstein did the math behind it. He said compounding. Okay, you call it compound interest. We'll just call it compounding for the sake of this. He said those that understand it earn it. Those that don't pay it. That's the answer for it. That little bit compounded over weeks and months and years and decades. Nobody can catch it. Period.
And that was one of the things I learned about from the billionaires. I grew up in Houston, and where I played was Houston, and Houston's the energy capital of the world. At least that's what I grew up hearing it termed as. The oil and gas industry. Most major multinational oil and gas companies have their US hubs in Houston, right? It's just a massive energy center. And so a lot of the billionaires and not just they weren't all billionaires. Some guys worth $300 million. What I'm supposed to oh, poo-poo, you're not a billionaire. No, I mean, these are I had dozens of these people, right, that I played for. And a lot of them came from the energy sector. And I remember one of them, explaining to me about oil prices. He said, like, the thing a lot of people don't realize about oil prices is you basically have, and I don't remember the numbers he used, but let's say at the time, let's use like modern numbers. It's essentially like global demand for oil is something like 90 million barrels a day. And global supply of oil, theoretically, is around 90 million barrels of oil a day. But what happens if we start producing an extra 100,000 barrels a day? Only 100,000 more than the 90 million that we need. And we do that for 6 months. Well, now we've got an extra couple million barrels of oil sitting around that nobody's using. They're parked on tankers off the coast. So now, instead of paying stable market prices, you have a surplus, you have an excess surplus, and somebody can go buy that cheap for pennies on the dollar, right? So he said, you'll have like a 1% change in production, but because it compounds and it accumulates day after day after day after day, it could end up creating a 50% swing in the price. Because the reality is, when there's surplus, the price drops. When there's not, the price goes up. And the price volatility is a lot more extreme than the production volatility. And this is what's called marginal economics. When you understand that supply and demand impacts value at the fringes, but even while the core stays the same, that same 90 million barrels a day, that's chugging along. It's that extra 100,000 on the side, either plus or minus supply or demand, that swings the prices dramatically. And when you start to understand that's actually how life works, everybody's working 40 hours a week. Working 40 hours a week doesn't do crap for you because everybody else does it too. It's that 41st hour. That's where all the supply and demand swing happens. That extra hour you put in, that extra calorie you burn. It's that, all water is, it's like when your water is 211 degrees and you're like, I'm going to turn it up 1 more degree. Now I can power a steamship and cross an ocean, right? David Goggins talks a lot about this with his 40% rule. Most people operate at about 40% of their capacity. It's like a SEAL concept that when you think your body's done, it's because you've hit the 40% threshold and your survival mechanism is kicking in saying, no, don't tap into your reserves, right? But every minute that you spend operating in a gear that other people won't operate in, it can be worth 10 years of operating in the same gear as everybody else, because of the principle of marginal economics. And you got to kick a little bit extra and you can double your value in a day. And I think that's what people just don't get, is like all the joy, and it was an oil guy, an oil billionaire that taught me that. He's like, that as much time as you can spend in that little extra gear, that's like manufacturing a few extra barrels of oil a day, compounded over a long period of time. You're going to own all the supply. And everybody else is going to be begging you to meet their demand.
I love it. And then a lot of what you've been talking about is also not just that extra hour and that compounding of that extra hour, but it's also the environment in which we all operate. Whether that environment is the toxic environment you allow yourself to be around and in with the friends and family you hang out with, or whatever the environment. And the other thing, if you take just that idea of compounding, that 1 extra hour, okay, to get ahead, but then you do that in a different environment, and now you're operating in the proper environment plus the compounding effect, that's earth shattering for you. And I just look at it like a lot of people like, well, I'm a visual guy. Airplanes fly in different environments. They fly in environments where they have a headwind. Slow, right? You've heard the pilot come on. We're facing heavy headwinds. We're going to land about 15 minutes late. If you have connecting flights, run your ass up. Or your plane's operating with a tailwind, and the pilot comes on, much different sound. Hey, we're flying at 30,000 feet. Things are great. Like, hey, the plane is flying with a great tailwind. We're going to arrive 30 minutes early. Enjoy your day. It's like, it's just one thing changed, the environment in which that plane flew, but we all have the ability, free will, whatever you want to call it, to operate in whatever environment we want. We just choose to be in toxic environments. Oh, no, I didn't choose that. That's the life I was born in. That's what you're telling yourself. Change the environment. Change the life that you were. Well, it's what is it? The social class. I was born into this, so that's what I'm going to live. That's you limiting your belief. That's you living at 40% your entire life. Hell, you're probably living at 20 if you think that. This is the things. It's just like that compound effect with the proper environment changes everything. And that's it. It's that simple. but yet everybody fights it. And that's the part I just get frustrated about. And I think you're frustrated too, but you're changing it. You're changing the environment through Entra. You're changing the environment with Escaping the Broken System, the book that comes out next year in August, I think you said, 2022.
August 22, yeah, 8/2/22.
You changed your environment. You changed everything. And then you just did the extra that nobody was willing to do. And look at where you're at. And look at you now, Jeff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because, you know, what's that? I forget the quote. It's like, you know, success. No, I'm going to butcher the quote so badly. I can't remember, but it's just something to the effect of like, and this is what I want people to see about my life is it's not this thing that you go hunting for. It's this thing that finds you once you're doing what you were created to do. And again, that's so far from the quote that don't even consider it a paraphrase. It's just something Jeff said. But like, that's what, you know, I guess if my life can stand for anything, and it's like, you know, every time I got closer to, if true north is serving other people from a place of total purity, the closer I've gotten to that true north, just the better life gets. And this, you know, I had a guy yesterday, for example, in Entra who said, you know, this is the underbelly, right? This is the stuff you don't read in the brochure. And he's like all pissed because he's like, I invested money in this, you know, these courses and I bought coaching. I mean, this guy spent like multiple 5 figures with us, right? And he's all pissed because he's like, I haven't made any money yet. And it kind of got escalated to me. And, you know, sometimes I'll get on the phone with people because it's like, it's not going to change what I have for dinner. We can get the guy his money back, but it's like, no, I started this because I want to like reach people. So let me at least talk to the guy. And so I'm like, okay, but who have you helped? And he's like, what do you mean? I spent all this money and I went through, and I'm like, okay, you spent money, you went through courses, you worked with a coach. I got all that, but who have you helped? And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, you're upset that you haven't made any money. And I'm saying money gets exchanged for value or assistance or help. Like if you're here indignant because you haven't gotten paid, I would think it's because you've helped all these people and you didn't get paid. So I'm asking, who did you help? And the reality is the guy hadn't done anything. He hadn't provided any value to anyone. He hadn't solved anybody's problem. He hadn't uplifted anyone. He hadn't served anyone. He hadn't contributed anything that I could detect that was remotely positive into the world. All he had done was he had spent a lot of time in his own need and his own, I don't want to call it greed because everybody, you know, people need money to live and stuff, but like he was so worried about himself, he forgot the part where you actually get paid to help other people, you know? And so
I don't know a company in the world that makes a penny if they don't solve somebody else's problem. Every company in the world, that's what they do. They solve a problem for somebody, period. Like the phone, the mouse, the mic, the headphones, like they're all solving a problem. That's why those companies make money. That's why the owner eats good or drives a nice car or flies in, first class. Like that's it. You don't solve the problem, you don't get paid, period.
Yeah, and Elon Musk said you get paid in direct proportion to the complexity of the problems you solve.
Yeah.
This guy hadn't solved any problem, so he hadn't gotten paid. It's like big shocker there, right?
Yeah, another hard thing is sometimes like, and I don't know how you resolve that, but I think I would have like listened to that and done something very similar to you. But then I would have had that realization with myself to realize that there are just some people that don't want to be helped. That's a hard thing. You got to learn when to say no so you can say yes to the right thing. But you could also go as far as you got to know who to say no to so you can say yes to help the right person.
Yeah, I tend to look at it as influence, like I'm, because it got escalated to me as like, hey, Jeff, you need to shut this down. And I took a different approach of like, I'm going to really try to talk to this guy and let's see. I think when you make this comment to somebody, hey, we get paid in exchange for the assistance we give or the problems we solve for other people, and you having helped no one and solved no problems, it would actually be wrong if you had been paid. Like you say that to someone and you figure out real quick whether or not they're seeking truth or they're seeking the lie. And in his case, we sort of left it with like, that's something to think about, and we'll see what he comes back with, who knows? But I think that, maybe that's a value for someone out there, is like, I know that we live in a world, and it's weird because everybody's trying to get, but the way you get is to give.
Yeah.
And everybody's waiting for everybody else to be the one that leads by example, so that then they have like implicit permission to start. And if I've done anything right, there's just been a few times in my life, let's use 3 years ago as an example, when I just kind of said, you know what, I'm going to see what happens if I live to give and don't ask for anything in return. That's the irony of Entre, is it was actually born out of giving, expecting nothing in return. I mean, it's the fastest growing education company in the world now. It's got, I just got invited to the, some fellowship in MIT, and I get invited on shows, and I got a book deal, and I get investors wanting to buy equity, and what else? Like, the sky's the limit for this thing. And it's like, it's almost like I pinched myself. I'm in a dream. I literally started the damn thing out of just giving video content to people, saying, hey, here's what I know. Here's what I've learned. Here's what you can do. There was no calls to, we talked earlier about how every video should have a call to action. I never had any calls to action because I didn't have anything to do or anything to sell. It was just like, here's a video. And eventually people got to the point where they were like, Jeff, do you have a course or something we can buy from you that'll like teach us step by, instead of piecemealing it from watching all your videos, like, could you create something that's really structured and takes us through a process to do the stuff you're talking about? And so I created a course called the Entre Blueprint. And that was over 200,000 units ago. It's the best-selling course. Now it's literally the best-selling business course in the history of the internet. And it started because I was giving without asking in return, and people actually got annoyed, because human beings have a natural instinct called reciprocity, where they're like, Jeff, we're uncomfortable here. You keep giving us without asking for anything. So we would like to buy something from you now. So I put a course together, and that's what launched this company. And that was 2.5 years ago.
It's just so incredible. So I'm 44 years old, and I learned what you just said a short 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. And that's all I've done ever since. And it's just kind of, blinking and thinking of your life. It's like, that's when everything changed. When you apply just that one thing that you just said, like, you didn't build this, you didn't do this, you didn't do the videos with anything else in your mind except for giving. Yeah. And because of that, you have everything you have, and it will never stop. That train will never come off the tracks. It will never slow down. It will go faster and faster and faster until you either arrive or until you decide it's about you and not them, which you won't, because you understand the laws. These are simple laws, like universal laws. Like,
we understand the laws, and we even say the laws, but we're surrounded by constant reinforcement of the opposite of the laws.
Correct.
And it's like, it's this really surreal existence we're in. I feel like we live in a MC Escher painting where, like, it kind of looks like it works, but it doesn't. Like, the geometry isn't quite right. And we know that, Zig Ziglar told us, if you help enough other people's dreams come true, then all of yours will, come true soon enough. And we know that, but nobody else is doing it. It's like, other people aren't doing it. So what, I'm going to be the weird one? Honestly, if somebody could listen to this whole interview, we've been talking a while. If somebody listened to the whole thing and they came away from there like, you know what, today I'm going to be the weird one, then I would feel like we've done our job.
This has been awesome, man. This is, like, we could have just kept going with this and going with this, but at a certain point, we got to get back to telling everybody that they just got to take action in their own lives. I mean, you took action, you got outside your comfort zone, you suffered and you made it. And, Entre, how do they learn more about that? I mean, I'm literally thinking, I know 3 people off the top of my head that need exactly what this is. So how do I find it?
Well, I appreciate the question. Honestly, I really just have gone until my book comes out. That'll make my call to action really easy. I'll tell everybody to buy the book, but for now, just go subscribe to me on YouTube. I think that, it's kind of like I said, give, and then you can receive, right? Like, it's like kind of like what it's Stephen Covey said, seek first to understand, then be understood, or whatever. My point is, come to my YouTube channel, watch my videos, let me give abundantly to you. If you like it and you want more of it, there's links all over the place. You can find, I mean, in my YouTube descriptions, on my website, on my Instagram, like wherever you can find Entre, you can learn more, but I would rather start from a place of just inviting people to let me give value to them. And if we jive, then we can go from there.
I love it. That is the absolute perfect answer that you could have given to that. So folks, go to the YouTube channel. What is the YouTube channel, Jeff?
It's Jeff Lerner Official. But if you just go on YouTube and type in, this was a big win for me the other day. I went on YouTube and I typed in Jeff and the letter L, and I was one of like the 3 suggested searches. It was like Jeff Lynn, who's a musician. There's another Jeff L and then Jeff Lerner. So I finally cracked the Jeff L Google suggested search. Now, if I can just type in Jeff and come up, then we're really getting somewhere.
All right. Well, you got 1 letter to go. So you just got to cut one letter off. That would be a win. Oh man, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you for your time, your knowledge, your wisdom, and just this message should ring true to every single person that listens to this. So thank you, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, Chris. This has been wonderful, man. I look forward to it.
So if you like this video, I urge you, check out my other videos by subscribing to this YouTube channel. Hey, also, hit that little alerts button right up there. It's somewhere up there. Actually smash the alerts button so that you are notified every time we put out a new video. And don't forget to tell other people about this, because there's a lot of people that need help when it comes to their money and how the truth really can change their financial future.